Idaho has a landlord-friendly late fee framework with minimal state-level regulation, consistent with the state's overall property rights-oriented approach to government regulation. The governing law is found in Idaho Code Title VI, Chapter 3, which covers landlord and tenant relations, along with general contract principles. If you're a landlord or tenant in Idaho, the limited statutory framework means the lease governs most late fee details. Let's start with the basics. Idaho does not impose a specific statutory dollar cap or percentage cap on late fees. There is no statute that limits the fee to a certain amount or percentage of rent. The fee is governed entirely by the lease terms and general contract principles. Idaho does not mandate a grace period by statute. There is no state law requiring a specific number of days before a late fee can be charged. If your lease says rent is due on the 1st and a late fee applies on the 2nd, that's enforceable. However, standard practice among Idaho landlords is to include a grace period of 3 to 5 days. The key legal principle is reasonableness under Idaho contract law. A late fee is a liquidated damages provision, and Idaho courts apply the standard two-part analysis. The damages from late payment must be difficult to calculate precisely at the time the lease is signed, and the fee must be a reasonable pre-estimate of those anticipated damages. A fee that is grossly disproportionate to the landlord's actual costs is an unenforceable penalty. Idaho courts have addressed liquidated damages in various contexts, and the principles apply equally to residential late fees. The fee must compensate the landlord for genuine costs, not punish the tenant. Administrative time, follow-up communication, bank fees, additional accounting, and the time value of money are all legitimate cost components. What's reasonable in Idaho? The state has a wide range of rental markets, from very expensive in Boise and the resort communities to moderate in other areas. A flat fee of $25 to $75 or a percentage-based fee of 5 to 10% of the monthly rent is generally defensible. The dollar amount should reflect the local rent level. A $75 fee on a $1,400 Boise rent is about 5% reasonable. The same $75 on a $600 rent in a smaller community is 12.5% at the upper boundary. The lease must clearly state the late fee terms. The lease should specify the rent due date, any grace period, the exact fee amount or formula, when the fee triggers, whether additional charges apply for continued non-payment, and whether the fee is defined as additional rent. Idaho courts expect clear written agreement. Oral arrangements about late fees are insufficient. Idaho's Consumer Protection Act, found in Idaho Code Title 48, Chapter 6, prohibits unfair or deceptive business practices. While the act primarily targets commercial transactions, it can apply to residential rental practices in certain circumstances. Systematic overcharging of late fees, particularly combined with failure to disclose the terms, could be challenged under this framework. Compounding late fees in Idaho are governed by the lease and the reasonableness standard. A single, one-time fee after the grace period is the simplest and most defensible approach. Daily or weekly compounding must produce a total that's reasonable. A compounding structure generating fees exceeding 15 to 20% of the monthly rent within a few weeks would likely face challenge. Most Idaho landlords use a single flat fee. The interaction between late fees and the eviction process in Idaho is fast. Under Idaho Code Section 6-303, the landlord must provide a 3-day notice for non-payment of rent. If the tenant fails to pay within 3 days, the landlord can file for eviction. Idaho's 3-day notice period is one of the shortest in the country. Whether unpaid late fees can be included in the 3-day notice depends on how the lease defines them. If defined as additional rent, they can be included in the total amount demanded. If treated as a separate charge, the landlord may need to pursue them independently. Best practice: define late fees as additional rent. The 3-day cure window is very narrow, meaning the amount demanded must be accurate from day one. Including non-compliant late fees in the demand gives the tenant grounds to challenge the notice. If the challenge succeeds, the landlord starts over, losing valuable time. Idaho does not impose a specific statutory cap on the security deposit. The amount is governed by the lease. The deposit must be returned within 21 days, or up to 30 days if the lease specifies 30. The landlord must provide an itemized statement of deductions. Unpaid late fees can be deducted if the lease authorizes it and the fees are reasonable. Failure to return the deposit within the required timeline can result in the landlord being liable for up to 3 times the amount wrongfully withheld. Idaho's treble damages provision for wrongful deposit withholding creates meaningful risk. Deducting excessive late fees from the deposit, fees that exceed what's reasonable, can trigger the 3 times penalty. A $50 excess deduction could become $150 in liability. This makes clean late fee calculations particularly important at move-out. For tenants receiving Housing Choice Voucher Assistance, Idaho landlords should not charge late fees when the Housing Authority's portion is delayed due to processing. The tenant cannot control the authority's payment timeline. If the tenant's portion is paid on time, the fee should apply only when the tenant's own payment is actually late. Idaho's military population is centered around Mountain Home Air Force Base, home of the 366th Fighter Wing. The base generates rental demand in Mountain Home and the surrounding area, a small market where military tenants represent a significant portion of the rental pool. Military pay is predictable, and most military tenants pay reliably. The standard 3 to 5 day grace period accommodates minor pay processing delays. The Boise area also has a growing defense and technology presence, including Micron Technology and various defense contractors. The professional workforce associated with these employers pays reliably. Idaho's explosive population growth over the past decade, particularly along the Treasure Valley corridor from Boise through Meridian, Nampa, and Caldwell, has transformed the rental market. The influx of California and Pacific Northwest migrants has driven rents up significantly and tightened supply. From a practical standpoint, Idaho's rental market is concentrated along the Treasure Valley, with secondary markets across the state. Boise is the state's dominant market and one of the fastest-growing cities in the country. The economy is driven by technology, Micron, HP, and a growing startup ecosystem, healthcare, including St. Luke's and St. Alphonsus, government, and the steady influx of remote workers and relocators. Rents in Boise have increased dramatically. Desirable neighborhoods like the North End, Hyde Park, and the Bench commonly range from $1,300 to $1,900. Most Boise landlords charge flat fees of $50 to $75, with a 5-day grace period. The professional tenant base, drawn from technology, healthcare, and corporate employment, generally pays on time. Late fee enforcement is standard, but limited to a small percentage of tenants. Meridian, Boise's largest suburb, has experienced explosive growth with strong demand. Nampa and Caldwell on the western end of the Treasure Valley have more moderate rents and a more diverse tenant population. Late payment rates may be slightly higher in these more affordable communities. Idaho Falls has a moderate market influenced by Idaho National Laboratory, one of the nation's premier nuclear research facilities. The INL workforce includes well-compensated scientists, engineers, and technicians who pay reliably. Pocatello, home to Idaho State University, has a moderate market with some student influence. Twin Falls has a growing market influenced by agriculture and food processing, including the Chobani yogurt plant. Moscow, home to the University of Idaho, has a tight student market. Coeur d'Alene and the North Idaho Panhandle have experienced dramatic growth driven by lifestyle migration. Rents have increased significantly, approaching Boise levels in desirable lakefront and downtown areas. The professional and remote worker tenant base generally pays reliably. Sun Valley, Ketchum, and McCall are resort communities with premium rents and seasonal workforce dynamics similar to what we discussed in our Montana video. Service industry workers earn seasonal wages that may fluctuate, and late payment patterns may correlate with tourist seasons. Landlords in resort communities should consider the seasonal income reality when setting late fee amounts. One best practice for Idaho landlords: set your late fee at a level that reflects the local market. Idaho's market variation is significant. Boise and Sun Valley rents are dramatically higher than smaller community rents. A percentage-based fee of 5 to 8% automatically scales to the rent level. A flat fee should be calibrated to each market. $60 on a $1,500 Boise rent is 4%, while $60 on a $700 Twin Falls rent is nearly 9%. Another best practice: include a grace period of at least 3 to 5 days, even though Idaho doesn't mandate one. The grace period prevents disputes from tenants whose payments are delayed by a day or two due to weekends, holidays, or processing times. 5 days is the most common standard across the state. A third best practice: pay careful attention to late fee calculations at move-out. Idaho's treble damages provision for wrongful deposit withholding means that deducting excessive late fees from the security deposit is expensive. If you're deducting unpaid late fees from the deposit, verify that every fee was properly calculated, properly disclosed in the lease, and charged after the grace period expired. Clean documentation prevents a treble damages claim. For the complete guide to Idaho late fee laws, visit tenantscreeningbackgroundcheck.com. Subscribe to our channel for every state in our late fee law series.